the day. I am super excited to have this group of authors here. They all, obviously write in the thriller or horror genre, but they also write in other genres too. So don't just think that they are limited to that just because they're on this panel. All right, so I would like everyone to go down the line and introduce yourself and talk about what you write. Paul, if you'd like to start us off.
Thank you, Hannah. It's a pleasure to be on the panel again this year. I write page turners and paperback. So I used to say that I write thrillers, suspense, and science fiction, but it's really about writing something that's thrilling, something that is interesting for the reader, and they usually come in paperbacks because they're not as expensive as hardcover. Right? That's good. There's thrillers and everything.
I'm Halli. I write queer characters mostly, but I write across genres. So I started with romance. Fenton is a werewolf horror crime thriller with the second part coming out next year, and then I'm finishing up a historical fantasy and a queer romance book as well.
Hi, I'm Ransom McCarthy. I write and draw my own comic books. This is from a vampire series called Plasma Head that I make. And then I do other stuff as well and draw all the time and paint all the time and all that.
Thank you. I'm BD Print. I'll keep this out here so it's not too loud. And I write psychological thrillers, horror, paranormal, suspense stories. So everything from nonfiction, 28 Years Haunted. It's a biography of Brandy Murray Miller. She's a star of the hit Netflix series 28 Days Haunted. And so if you want to find out what it's like to see dead people when you're 5 and go on adventures, and then what it's like to do a Netflix series where you're locked down for 28 days straight in a ridiculously haunted location. And then my fiction, I have a novella collection called Eye for an Eye, which is psychological thrillers with a common theme of eye for an eye. So I think some good female revenge tales with a twist ending. And then my new one, which doesn't officially release until Tuesday, but you can get it today, is 13 Ghastly Tales, and the short story collection. It's eclectic. It's got a little bit of something for everybody. So everything from supernatural, sci-fi, serial killers, Native American mythos, circus, sideshows, so those are for everybody. But I think kind of like Twilight Zone style suspense fiction is what I like to write.
Hello, I am Bevin Goldsmith. I write military fiction, so think of female Tom Clancy mixed with like Atomic Blonde, if you've seen that movie before. So I have a series called Adrenaline Rush. This one's book 1, and I have book 2. So military fiction is primarily what I write. It's my genre. I tried to do a rom-com, it did not work out very well, because apparently explosions are not very romantic. So, I mean, I think perception is someone's reality, but really, the critiques were very judgmental. So, but I also do a radio show called Radio Check, which airs on CHW Radio every Wednesday at 5 p.m. It's a nonprofit organization that supports veterans, service members, and first responders, as I also work in law enforcement for my day job. I also do a podcast for them called Iron Maidens, which is this platform for female veterans, service members, first responders to come on and share their stories of what they go through on a daily basis, which is kind of like what these books are about. It's to show the female perspective of service members, because we process things differently. So that is me.
So don't mess with that. I'm here.
Awesome. Bevin, if you just want to keep that microphone, we'll start with you. So I have some questions for all the authors, and then we'll go into individual questions about their work as well. So we'll start with questions for everyone. My first one for Bevin is, what draws you to thriller and horror? And that's for everyone, by the way. So Bevin, if you want to start us off.
I get more so drawn to thrillers than horror. Thrillers, I like writing things that are exciting. It's not like writing to go back to a romantic comedy. it's different. It's very kind of like my series. It's very adrenaline filling. I like writing stories like that because it's exciting to me, and those are the types of experiences that I've gone through. So when I am writing stories like that, I am in my niche. I know how those things feel, so I write those types of stories the best.
I was warped at a young age by an older brother, which helped. But I grew up on reruns of Munsters, Addams Family, Twilight Zone, Night Gallery, Tales from the Crypt. So from a very young age, I was drawn to this scary stuff. I just love to be able to look at something and never think of it the same way again. So when I write a story, it's like taking something that's mundane, but it's like, taking a shower after watching Psycho, or going to the beach after you've seen Jaws, So if you can take something mundane like that and then twist it so that people never look at that the same way again, and to have that resonance, and it's like the best compliment. People are like, oh, I was doing this, or I saw this person, it reminded me of this character of yours, reminded me of this story of yours, and I'm like, okay, that's the ultimate compliment. But yeah, I've always been excited by the thrill of the spooky and the twisting of normal.
A lot of what Brian just said, like I grew up, I think I saw Saw, like the first one for the first time when I was like 6 or 7.
It's the appropriate age.
Yeah, it's a great age for that.
Our support group will get together
I
later.
appreciate it. So like growing up with things like Saw and like Resident Evil and things like that, but also like coming at it from like a drawing background, it's like with horror you have to think about what not to show. Like oftentimes it's way more interesting, right? So as an artist, it's challenging that way, but also when I draw, I use like a lot of ink, and I love splattering ink around. And vampire comics lend themselves really well to that. So you can kind of like really play with what not to show, but also this like really crazy line work and really like splattery ink effects and like that interplay between that. So my style and just how I like to draw really lends itself to it.
I love that, what not to show. That's half of the scary part. That's what really, really good art does, is let your brain, I think that's where I actually came from horror at, because I'm a librarian and I work in book publishing now, and it's always interesting to see horror spike as a genre, just as horror in real life happens. There's a need for catharsis there. It happened during the pandemic when all of a sudden people want dystopic stories. I'm like, why do you want to read that? Because everybody processes it differently. I like the body horror aspect of vampires and werewolves. It is interesting. It's clearly a metaphor for transformation and the monsters in men. So I approach it from that perspective, but also from a historical perspective as well, looking at the different tales we've told each other over a campfire over generations and generations as well. So I like to think I'm that smart and I pull from those places, but it is always kind of running in the back of my head, those themes.
Thank you. There's this little website that I follow. Maybe raise your hand if you've heard of this website. It's called Amazon. Anybody? Okay. Oh, a couple of you have heard of Amazon. And Amazon's really good at lots and lots and lots of data. And there's so many different genres that are out there. Just in one genre alone that they follow, it's called mystery, thrillers, and suspense. But what we're talking about here, the spaces between, as Ransom so eloquently said in our sentences, is diverted into 20 or 30 different ways to buy that book. So when we look at the data, Amazon puts it into mysteries, thrillers, and suspense. Mysteries is a circumstance that needs to be solved. You think of Agatha Christie, there's something that has to be discovered, there's problem solving. Thrillers, there's strong feelings of excitement, anxiety, tension, suspense, fear. Haven't got that 100% right. Good start in the forehead. But suspense is about the audience's feelings they go through while waiting. They like the not being told everything all at once. They're waiting for outcomes of certain events, right? So just in that one genre alone, with 20 different categories, there's sub-themes that go through all of them. And you had asked this, you mentioned earlier that we write things outside of that. So I don't write horror, but I write fiction, which is good, and literature, which is a big, big genre, right? But inside each of those stories, you start to think about what the reader wants to read, what's going to excite them. And in every story, there's going to be some level of mystery, there's going to be some level of thriller, some type of suspense. Harry Potter, as I always say, right? It's Dobie who says it best. It's on a canvas, it's on a background of kids going to school and growing up. And when you tell people it's about witches and magic and wizards, because Harry Potter, you're a wizard now. But what really happens in each of those stories is something that is much more of a mystery. We've got to find the room, we've got to find the locket, we've got to find the guy who's the werewolf. It's a lichen, right? That's the word for it, a lichen. Or it's the thriller. You get in the car that you stole from your parents and you drive into space, right? Or the giant tree attached to you. That's my favorite one. There's suspense, and around every corner, what is Harry and his friends going to do? Well, you don't think of Harry Potter as a mystery science theater 3000. Of course you don't. Mystery thriller or suspense. You think of that as books about fantasy. But every story has to include those three things: thrillers, suspense, and mystery, to make it enjoyable for the reader. I'll get off my soapbox now. But that's why I'm drawn to the genre, because whatever it is, I want the reader to experience something. It's not just about putting words out there in a certain order that go out there. Is that a good answer, Hannah?
Yes, that is.
All right.
You always give good answers, Paul.
Well, we'll see about that later, won't we?
We'll keep the mic.
I'll make some stuff up.
Alright, so Paul, you write really imaginative worlds in multiple genres.
Yeah.
What's been your favorite world that you've created? And what world that you've created would you absolutely never want to live in?
Well, I didn't create it, but this world alone is why I write escapism, right? Because I want to get out of it. A recent book that I wrote, it's a trilogy, it's science fiction, fantasy, adventure. If you need to put it into a bucket of genres, as Amazon does. It's about space. There's some space pirates in it. There are people who make robots, and there's very smart clockmakers. But in that world in which they live, the clockwork constellation, that universe that they live in, there is a planet called Inkwell, and this is my favorite world that I think I've created. And I might have stolen some ideas here, but I really like the idea of, they land on this planet, and it's drawn, it's all ink. You would like this. Yeah, you like ink. He's splattering it all over the pages. And in each of the different realms of this world of Inkwell, it's a different color. And the different color means something different. So when they land, they enter into this, I'm gonna say sepia tone. Is that a real word?
Yeah.
Sepia tone, thank you, I didn't say it wrong. It's kind of this brownish, old style looking color, but it's it looks just like the Provence in France. And every brick on the cobblestone streets is a handwritten love letter. It's a very romantic area of the planet, and it's taken on that tone. And then they cross over into this world that's stark, and it's black and white. And people got 6 shooters, and they run, and they do, right? And it is all about the Maltese Falcon. It's that noir kind of writing. And they go to the blue realm, and in this part of the world, it's all 1950s science fiction with giant robots fighting the city, right? It was challenging as a writer to convey each of those emotions in different worlds and different realms, but I think it's enjoyable for the reader, because by the first 3 pages, when you get into a world, you catch on, there's a different writing style here. And that imaginative, I'm talking way longer, I don't know. The imagination that it allows you to go through there is the thing I think that's the best world I've created. What's your best world? Is it the one we're living in today?
There are so many things I can change. Yes. Yes.
Do you want that question? Do you want to talk about it? Okay.
I just got stuck there for a second.
So one of the questions I have for you is, do you think thriller and horror challenge characters and readers in ways that other genres don't?
Absolutely, every genre is a challenge to the writer, to anyone that consumes it, to anyone who thinks about, even maybe to reading the back of the book. It's forcing you to look at a perspective that's coming from someone else. I think art does that, and it forces us to look at someone else's perspective. Horror in particular, for me, because I loved the really like visceral, nasty horror for a really long time, and then I got old and it didn't do something for me anymore. I started to lean toward the more like X-Files-y psychological horror, the things you don't see, what the heck is around the corner type of thing, because your imagination runs wild. When I wrote Venor, it was an experiment to see if I could do it. Just because I'm like, just because I like it doesn't mean I can do this. Doesn't mean I have the skill set for this kind of a thing. But it did let me go like, oh, what does a werewolf transformation look like? And why can't they make it look really good on TV or in movies? It always looks so hokey. I feel like Van Helsing maybe got it the best, but it's a challenge in a different kind of way. It just makes us use a different part of our brain. And sometimes it clicks and sometimes it doesn't for folks. I don't know. Yes, this thing that I told you before, I have no objectivity on my books. Once they're written, they're out of my brain completely. Venor starts as a very simple conflict between a guy who owns like maybe a third of the bar and his ex owns the rest. And he's like, I hate working here, I hate my ex, we still have to work here together, I hate this guy so much. And he's just doing his nightly thing behind the bar, and then a guy starts foaming at the mouth and picks a fight. Renzo, the main character, says, okay, nope, not my bar, we are not doing this. Gets him out of there, and then the guy turns into a werewolf and explodes. So it's like, what the just happened? What do? I swear like a sailor, I try not to. There's no children in Iraq. Runs into a private detective who happened to be in the bar that night because he tracked his last victim down. He's working for the brother, the sister has gone missing, she's now dead, and tracked her to Renzo's bar. And now they're on the run from people who want to experiment on human beings and turn them into werewolves.
Your book sounds awesome.
So many eyeballs.
Eyeballs, we love eyeballs.
Yes.
All right, and then for Ransom, I'm wondering, how do you match your illustration style with the story that you're telling, and could you describe your story too?
So yeah, how do I match my illustration style with the story that I'm telling? When I started writing these and coming up with the ideas for them, part of it was because I decided that coloring comics takes way too long, and it's like if you make these things in black and white, like they'll go by, you'll save a couple months of like schedule time. And like looking at comics history, like if you look at like Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, which is like a huge influence of those early 80s comics, like those were done like they were snowed in and they were just getting drunk while snowed in and like drawing the funniest things that they can. And I think it was Kevin Eastman drew a turtle with nunchucks, right? And that's how this whole thing was born. So a lot of it's out of necessity, like black and white. It's like it's cheaper produced. It's also more fun to work in because you are dealing with more dramatic lighting. As far as matching it to the story, I don't have like a specific like this is how I have to draw this thing this specific way, right? Every time I try and do that, I find myself getting trapped, and I end up just telling myself draw how you draw and like keep it fun, right? So when I draw, like just anything, even if I'm outside, just like in the park, drawing some trees or whatever, it's this idea of capturing like motion and how can I do that in my work, right? It's not always like, okay, like it's a vampire comic, so it has to be like stark black and white. So as far as the story goes, because you asked that as well, I'm sorry if I'm going long. So the story, Plasma Head, is about a girl named Eve Spector. She's like early mid-20s. And in the first issue, which is free to download on my website, ransomMcCarthyartwork.com, she has a one-night stand with someone and then gets bit during that one-night stand and then wakes up. And she's just like burning alive, like fever style, right? Like, it's not like, you know, usually when you think vampires in sunlight, like you just think like they burst into flames immediately. Like I wanted to play with that. So in the first issue, she's in her apartment in late October, she has the fans on and the windows open, and she's like burning alive, even though it's only like 63 degrees out or something like that. And she like goes to get ice cream. Like she's like, I'm gonna go bike up this hill and get ice cream, and that'll cool me down. And she goes outside to bike up this hill, and like it just gets worse and worse because she's in the sunlight longer. And I really wanted to like churn up the tension that way. Like I've had this idea in my head about a vampire having to go for a walk in the sun forever, and that was my way of like doing that. And then she gets to this ice cream place on top of this hill, and she like loses it by then because she's in the sun for too long. So that's kind of the basis of the story. It's just this girl trying to deal with the consequences of being a vampire. Does that answer the questions?
Yes, that does.
Okay, I
Yeah,
feel like
that
I
was
ran,
great.
but yeah.
That was good.
Sounds like a slow burn.
Yeah.
Story.
That's
Say the gender.
Slow burn, yeah.
Slow burn, that was good.
And then it's just like, that's kind of this engine from like here on out. Like, what can I do with this vampire in these mundane situations like Brian was talking about? Yeah.
All right, and my next question is for Brian. So Brian got his start as a writer doing humorous greeting cards and penning one-liners for Joan Rivers. You're also an award-winning author and screenwriter. You've won the 2024
Imagine Award.
Imagine Award for the novel 28 Years Haunted. So how does your creative process differ from writing screenplays to short stories to novels?
From a idea perspective, it doesn't change, just story to story. When it comes to the actual process of writing, there's some stark contrast, but there's also some similarities between different media. So, for example, film is a very visual medium, and also you primarily work with external conflict. So, again, depending on the medium, they each have their strength. If you're in the theater, it's more interpersonal conflict because you don't have a lot of settings and you can't create these giant worlds and travel and stuff like that. So it's more about interpersonal conflict. And then when it comes to prose, that's where you can really delve deep inside. So you get into the internal conflict and what's that person thinking, and what's their emotions, and what are they feeling at a given point. So that plays into it. Screenwriting, very structured, but in a way, it's very similar to short fiction. So they're both difficult in the perspective that you have to be very terse in your writing. So you can't go on flowery prose, page after page. And I don't know about you, but if I have to read 10 pages about somebody making their breakfast and how much they enjoy it, I'm just like, you're killing me. I want something to happen. But with fiction, you can explore and expand and really work with the language in that. But short story and screenwriting, it's very, again, terse is probably the best word for that, where you get to the point and it's, you got to do it with an economy of words. And that's the challenge with those formats. To me, short fiction is really the hardest because you have to introduce a character, make people care about them, do terrible things to them, and then worry about what's going to be the outcome. And I love to go to journey through that uncanny valley, and you mentioned suspense, and that's really more what I write is the suspense, where you're dreading what's going to happen. You have the mystery, the question mark. What is going to happen? I don't know. This is weird. And so that constant, you got to turn the page to find out what happens next, but you're afraid to turn the page because you don't know what's going to happen next. And so there's differences in the different forms. Each has their challenge, but each also has their benefit of what you can bring to the reader.
So, thank you. Great answer. And then, so Bevin here is probably the most impressive person in this whole building.
Easily.
She is a veteran. Her journey began in 2006 when she enlisted in the United States Air National Guard. And then she transferred to active duty Army in 2008, and that's where you went into the military police, right? Okay. And then she joined the female engagement team in the counter IED. Am I saying that right?
So I was hand selected when I deployed for Operation New Dawn to lead female engagement teams. And then one of the missions that we would do just with my regular police company was counter IED missions.
Okay.
Would go out, find IEDs.
That's crazy. Oh my god, and then she went to
It's a
ISAC
job.
for Operation Dawn. And then
Somebody's gotta do it.
somebody's gotta do it. So I'm wondering how much of your character, Katie, in Adrenaline Rush is based on your own experiences?
That is actually a really phenomenal question. So, most people don't know, I started writing Adrenaline Rush when I was actually in middle school, not when I was in the military. So I actually made we'll say the blueprint for Adrenaline Rush when I was in middle school. And then when I joined the military, I think it was stationed at Luke Air Force Base in Arizona at the time. I hadn't written for quite some time, and I saw it on my desktop, and I opened it up, and I said, oh, well, look at this. What can we do with this? And from there, that is really when I started molding and shaping the story. And so the blueprint for this story was written by like a 14-year-old girl. But the meat and potatoes of the story was written by an active duty service member, female, who was going through all these different experiences and trying to figure them out as she went along. So it is very much based on, I'm not gonna say, because Kate Molson is really, she's a conglomerate, we'll say, of a lot of the females that I've served with and their experiences. So she's not, the experiences she goes through in the books or the series is not primarily me. It's just a mashed up version of everybody that I've served with, all the females I've served with. But the foundation of her character is very much me, if that answers your question.
I didn't know you started writing that in middle school.
I started writing when I was 10. But this story I started writing in middle school.
Okay. That's amazing. Great. Well, keep the microphone. I'll go into my second question for you.
Okay.
Where are you on my page? I'm sorry. So do you think writing has helped you process working in such a high stress environment? And I think I've seen veterans thank you for the books that you write because it helps them feel seen. Do you want to talk about that?
Yeah, it has, actually. I think if I didn't start writing the story, I think I probably, it's very difficult to process things in that type of environment. It's not really what is, it's not required of you and it's not asked of you, depending on what your job is. So, I mean, it wasn't really journaling for me. I was writing a story, but yes, it very much helped me process things. And writing, I think, is a great space for someone to really do a lot of introspection into themselves and really get to know yourself, which is honestly something, and I can say from a veteran standpoint, it's not something that we always have the courage to do, is sit and introspect, because then you start to realize how many things you didn't process, and the internal struggle that's going on, if that makes sense. In regard to other veterans thanking me, I have had a lot of veterans come on and thank me. At first, when I came out with the stories, I was really nervous because not a lot of females share their experiences from the military. It's really and it's not on purpose. And female service members, like our stories, end up being very overshadowed and undertold. Not really sure why. It's just kind of how it is. But I'm really working to change that. So I was really nervous when I came out with these stories, but I ended up getting thanked a lot by a lot of male service members that I worked, really good friends of mine that were really proud of me and coming out and talking about, writing these books and just talking about other things, other experiences that I've gone on or gone through, because we're there too, not just men. So, but they have thanked me and explained to me that the biggest issue that we have is the moment that you can't talk about something is the moment that it's actually out of control. So there's a common misconception that just because you're not talking about something that you have control of it, and that's not the case at all. So.
That's a great answer. Right, and then for Brian, I would love to hear about how you combine horror and comedy in your books. Because they generally don't seem, well, maybe don't seem like two things that go together, but they go together pretty well.
That's a great question. Oddly enough, horror and comedy are kind of two sides of the same coin. So, again, I got my start actually writing professionally, writing humorous greeting cards and one-liners for comedian Joan Rivers. And so when you're writing a joke, you have the setup, the build, and then the punchline. Okay. In horror, you have the setup, the build, and the scare. So structurally, they're almost the same. So they do work really well that way. The challenge, and I've learned this the hard way, and hopefully have grasped that so I don't make this error, is they work great together, but they can't step on each other's toes. That's where you run into problems. So an example is I wrote a creature feature script called Boondocks. And I had this one scene that's horrific, you know, these creatures are coming and it's up to this one character and he's seeing it for the first time, the horrors of this creature, right? But it's the comic relief character, okay? He's like the Matthew Dillard, right, from Scream, or the Shaggy. And it wasn't landing. People were not getting the horror, some of the readers, and I don't get it. And what happened was, I had this great funny line, this punchline that he threw in there, which was great, it was hysterical, but because it was too close to the scare, it turned the emotion from fear to laughter. And so I didn't have the space to, and you know, talking about suspense and building that suspense and the dread and then the shock, you know, all those elements of good horror and thrillers. And it was kind of weakened by the comedy. And, you know, I love both. And so it was hard not to keep that in there. And so I had to, you know, talk about kill your darlings, right? I had to take that out because it was stepping on the toe of the horror. So, but horror, and also, you know, we have, whether it be thrillers, action, or horror, you have to, you know, you wrap them up and their adrenaline's rushing and your heart is racing and then you need that release. And that's where comedy comes in great in horror, is when you can finally, okay, take a break, relax, and then you can throw a little humor to kind of bring down the temperature a little bit before you start ramping it back up again. So I do a lot of it with dialogue primarily when it comes to the comedy within the horror. Just, yeah.
I like that, the ebb and flow of it. That's hard to do. All right, then for Ransom, I'd love to ask you about being an educator. Does that work? Okay, so you have a BFA in studio art from Central Michigan University.
Yep.
And you're also an educator as well. How does being a teacher affect your creative process? Like, how is it, you know, creating like lesson plans for students when you're also working on your own art?
What did you teach?
So I teach art at Flint Cultural Center Academy, and I'm a museum educator at the Flint Institute of Art. So that's my background in that. Thank you. So in terms of like lesson planning, it's kind of similar to what Brian was just talking about with building up scares and laughs, where it's like you have to like slowly like give them skills to like build up to a project, right? Like I can't just walk into the classroom and be like, all right, we're gonna paint like a really pretty portrait today. Like you can't do that. Like that's not how it works. You have to like slowly, like here's how light forms around like a ball, right? Here's how the face works with like different planes. Here's the skull, right? So it's a lot of like build up and like continuous build up until that payoff. In terms of like being a teacher and how that affects like my own creative work, right? I work with people of all ages. Like I've worked with like preschoolers who are like in their first school setting, all the way up to like senior citizens who are just like coming in to make some artwork, like at the museum. And I keep hearing like a thing from the mic, so I'm gonna move this back. Sorry. But it's crazy how more afraid people get to make stuff the older they get, I feel like. Because if you walk into a 4th grade classroom and you have watercolors and clay and like wire, that is like the best day of their school year. Like it just is. Like I've heard kids say that. Like they have so much excitement and they have so much fun with it and they just make totally unfiltered. And that is really inspiring in one way. Like if we all played a game of Never Have I Ever right now, and I was like, never have I ever drawn with crayons, all of you would have to take a drink. Like, that's just how it is. And kids are really inspiring in that way. But once they get older, like middle school, high school, and then well into adulthood, they become more self-conscious about what others might think of them. And as their teacher, I have to go like, hey, like, it's not about them, it's about what you want to make, and like, how can we get you there? Like, believe in yourself. So with like younger kids, it's like, okay, cool, like I just spent so much time with like people who love making stuff. I'm gonna go home and make stuff, right? And like that's inspiring, and it fills your cup in that way. But as they get older, you spend so much time telling kids to like believe in yourself and trust the process and all that, and then you come home at the end of like a really long day because you have errands and stuff after work, right? And you're like, man, I don't want to do anything, I can't do any of this, I'm too tired, but you just spent however many hours telling people to just make something and believe in themselves. And you just have to take your own fucking advice at that point. Like, it's just how it is. Like, so it works twofold in that way. Does that answer the question?
Yeah, I love that.
Yeah, so.
Kids really are the best that way.
Kids, yeah.
Unfiltered imagination.
Yeah.
It really is. Like, that first comic that I was talking about, I wrote that in my dorm room at a summer camp. And I spent a lot of time at that summer camp waiting in line to get ice cream because it was always a really long line. And just talking to the kids that I was working with, and they would just come up with the wildest ideas. So yeah, they're cool.
I
Kids are
like
cool.
that. Thank you. Alright, and then for Halli, you're known for writing realistic characters. Who's your favorite character that you've created, and how do you decide what conflict to put them through?
I picked this question and it
You
still
did.
gave me
You
like a
did.
psychic wound listening to it. I was like, dang it, why did I make this so hard on myself? As much as I do love Renzo, who has, he is actively in addiction treatment. It's a topic very close to my heart with having watched family members go through that. I probably have to go with my kind of sort of piece of shit friend, but also the guy you can call whenever you need anything, Lawton, in my historical fantasy trilogy, because he really does go through an entire swing of like, oh, I really messed up. I hurt the only person I really care about. Why did I do this? Why didn't I think of this? And you see the peak and then the downfall of the regret and him trying to, he feels very real to me. Like, he really, really goofed. And as a society, especially with social media, we are not very forgiving with people who make a blunder and then try to actively fix it and recall it and learn from it. We just throw them in the trash bin. Now, if they do something stupid and they don't care, then dumpster. Especially if they're hurting people. So he actively tries to make that happen. And I felt bad for him when I was writing him. I'm like, I'm sorry I did this to you. I'm so sorry I did this to you, but also you're kind of a piece of shit. Like, figure yourself out and go to therapy, maybe, and then, you know, work on it a little bit. What was the second part? I'm so sorry. I'm so scattered today.
It was how do you decide what conflict to put your characters through?
I am actively learning to not be conflict avoidant in my own life. So writing it is cathartic, even if it makes my hands sweat and makes me panic a little bit. This is such an awful line. I'm going to say it anyways. There's not very many witnesses for this. I let them decide what the conflict is most of the time. If I try to plan it out too tightly, my brain brain will take the side alley approach and veer off course. So I don't outline very often. I know motivations for characters, and then everything else kind of gets. I write with absolutely no guardrails. I was the kid that bowled with guardrails, and now I write with. There's no safety net.
That was not awful to say.
Okay.
That wasn't bad at all. Great, and then for Paul,
Yes.
hello.
Right.
What's it like to delve into the world of psychological thrillers and serial killers? Is it fun? Is it weird? Is it creepy?
Yeah, well, you were just saying something that I thought if we get this question. I don't like to write about psychological thrillers because the ones that I've written, I think they turned out well. But that was not a fun year to write. Like, you didn't want to be around me because I was thinking about the worst awful things. And the characters really did get tortured. Stephen King says you're supposed to torture your darlings. Yeah, I don't know if he's right.
Oh, yes.
Because you start to really, but there's got to be some goodness in it. As a human being, you want some empathy. And you realize with the psychological thrillers that a lot of times there's no reason to give them empathy. You just really, okay, they deserve it, they torture them, it's fine. So I think that that's okay. But
Worked in Red Dragon, right?
yeah, Thomas Harris, right?
Yeah.
Red Dragon.
I mean, yeah, that was like the first, kind of really evil serial killer type of person where you start empathizing, like, oh, I feel sorry for this guy, like he's horrible. I shouldn't feel anything positive for this guy or sympathy for him, but.
Yeah, the Tooth Fairy is what they call them, right? My memory isn't as bad as I thought it was. I haven't read that book in a while. Boy, I enjoyed that book though. I enjoy Clancy. I enjoy Tom Harris. And there's so many great books out there. But when you're in the other seat, when you're in the driver's seat, trying to write those things down, I just think the FBI is going to break through my door for research.
Don't look at my browser search history, that's for sure.
Why are you researching those topics? Well, I used to hike with my friend, and we go out to this really great place, and there's this good incline, and we get our hiking sticks out, we get our day packs, and we hike it along. We've got binoculars to look for wildlife and birders, because birders, I don't know if you know this or not, they know all the secret spots where you can bury bodies. And this was the time when I'm writing the psychological thriller. It's like, buddy, this would be a great place. It'd be hard to get down that ravine. You could just roll the body in. You could chop up the pieces. That is the last time he ever went walking. It's like, are you dropping me a hint, Paul? No, not you. It's this voice in my head. So I don't write too many psychological thrillers anymore. That's why I kind of like the fantasy, action, adventure stuff at the moment, because I'm giving myself a little bit of a break. But I've got some good works that are psychological thrillers. One of them is called Insensible Loss. Two people, hundreds of years ago, find the fountain of youth, and when you drink from the fountain of youth, you turn into a baby. So they take turns drinking from the water and becoming a baby, and they take turns raising each other so they can be immortal. But one of them is evil. That's not that wasn't a really, and then there's another one called Combustible Punch. It's about a high school shooting survivor, worst thing you could probably go through in life. But later in life, as an adult, he becomes the focus of a female serial killer who just wants to stalk him and take him down. Both good reading, both really weird times in my life.
Okay. On that note, I think we have time for one audience question, if anyone wants to ask a question.
You're gonna wrestle to see who gets
If not, that is completely fine. I think you guys scared them.
Yeah. There's a question in the back, there's one up here too.
In the back, yes.
Yeah.
For anybody, what is it that drew you to write in the first place?
Okay. What is it that drew you to write in the first place?
Bevin, you were 10. What were you thinking?
So when I was growing up,
I hated my parents for this, but now that I'm older, I realize how much it shaped my writing. My parents were very cultural people, so I grew up watching a lot of musicals, Little Women, every Jane Austen movie possible. And I remember it was Little Women, like one of the original versions of Little Women I was watching. And it was a part where someone was writing and they ended up writing a book with a quill pen on paper. And for some reason, at my age, I thought to myself, that sounds like a great idea. And from then on, I was just hooked because of all that literature that I was, we'll say, indoctrinated with. That I don't know, I found this thrill in writing stories, and I like helping people and serving people and making people happy. And I found that when you can write a good story, it can help someone and it can make them happy. And I liked that, so I kept doing it.
I've been writing since the 3rd grade, so kind of very similar. My first creative writing assignment, most of the kids are pulling out their hair and trying to fill a whole page with that. I'm on page 10. I'm like, is it okay if I keep going? It's like the teacher, like, well, okay, maybe wrap it up soon here. But I've always had a really active imagination, and also at a young age spent a lot of time alone, either out in the woods or I could actually see a cemetery from my bedroom window, which might also be a slight influence on me. But I just always had that really active imagination, always imagining the worst that could possibly happen. And that was kind of worked into the stories.
What drew me to write drew me to write. So it's both actually, because I was like really young when the first Spider-Man movie came out, and it was the coolest thing ever, and still arguably is. And I was just drawing Spider-Man like all the time, still do. And my dad's like, hey, you can totally get paid to do that. Here is this giant box of stuff that your mom wants me to get rid of. So I have like all these old cool 90s comics that I just fell in love with, and then I grew up across the street from a comic book store in Berlin. And it was like, oh, like this is all just like cool stuff that people made. You can totally do this. Like, that's how it started. I was like 4 or 5.
I was basically raised by a librarian in my town, and that's, she was like my second grandma, and encouraged me to go to library school and do all of that and stay in that career, and my life has always been surrounded by books. I hate moving because books are so heavy, and then I have to weed them. It's awful. It's genuinely awful. It's okay. Yeah. I don't need to lift weights. What a thing to complain about. But yeah, I was always surrounded by stories because they were escapism. They were the way that I got out of a household that maybe wasn't the kindest to the children living in it. And it let me shape my worldview by reading other people's. And same thing that kind of what Bevin said. I wanted to see if I could help somebody else the way someone else's book had helped me as a kid.
When was the question was when?
Why did you start to write?
I needed to communicate on paper. That's why, right? I only recently realized that they changed the way that you're taught how to read and to write. And I didn't realize that until like a month ago, 2 months ago. It's a very different process. I always assumed people learned recently how I learned, about spelling, sounding out words and going through sentences. And it's made me reflect on that. So I guess I feel very fortunate, privileged to have learned how to read and write the way that I learned how to read and write. History, Paul, shut up, it's history. If you go back to people were taught how to read because in the factories they had to have a certain reading proficiency to operate the machines. Or you could go through and operate this and read the instruction manual and teach it to somebody else. And I feel very fortunate to have had a public school teaching where they taught me more than that. So I always enjoyed that. I enjoyed story time. I wanted to be a part of that. I don't remember the first thing I wrote, but I remember having to move that first time to college, to my dorm room, like, am am I gonna take all this old stuff that I wrote like years ago? And I did. I don't know if it's good or not, but it was heavy. My good friend, Ben, is a lawyer, and the worst time I ever had moving someone wasn't someone who was a librarian. He was a lawyer, and he had so many law books. And I just said, this is the last time you're moving. You are living in this house the rest of your life.
This is where you die.
This is where you're gonna, this is it. Get comfortable. Books are good.
Thanks, Larry. Awesome, I think that's a perfect note to end on. Thank you all so much for coming to our thriller and horror panel. Thank you to our authors. I appreciate it. Round of applause.